Hello, adventurers. My name's Tyler.
And I'm Richard.
On today's episode, we're talking about Werewolf the Apocalypse with the Monster Game Night Podcast. Welcome to True Strike.
Howdy, folks, and welcome back to the show. This evening, we are joined by our friends over at the Monster Game Night Podcast. If you will recall from an earlier episode, we talked about having the privilege in playing through a Dread one-shot run by Mike at Gen Con. Tonight, he and Ben are joining us to talk about Werewolf the Apocalypse. Hey, guys.
Hey, thank you so much for having us on. This is Mike.
And it's Ben here. Thanks for having us on, gentlemen.
No, thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you.
Before we get really deep into it, for anyone who hasn't listened to, Monster Game Night Podcast yet, what's your sales pitch? Throw it to the people.
I'll leave to Mike to this one.
Oh gosh, we're such a famous piece of IP. I can't believe that there's people in the world who haven't heard of us. But if you're one of like the 4 people who doesn't know what Monster Game Night is, we're a dark comedy actual play podcast. We're a World of Darkness show. We play Vampire the Masquerade, Werewolf the Apocalypse, and Hunter the Reckoning, but we try to be funny. We really try to be It's Always Sunny in the World of Darkness.
And now that he's gotten the serious sales pitch out of the way, I'll just say we're just some guys hanging out, having fun, producing an indie podcast. We've been able to be fortunate to run some stuff at Gen Con, a couple live shows this past year, including Mike's Dread game. We ran a few other things. And we've branched out a little bit as well, just while we were figuring out what we were due the second season. Currently, we're in the middle of a zombie world arc. We're going to come up on me running Cyberpunk Red soon enough. So there's a little variety there as well. But our home is definitely World of Darkness.
That's awesome. Speaking of the Gen Con stuff, are you guys looking at, this is the personal question, are you guys going to be running stuff again next year or planning on that?
100%.
Absolutely, 1,000%. I'm already looking forward to it. I'm already counting off the days and what we're going to do differently and better next year. But yes, we'll absolutely be there again.
And Tyler, I believe you ran across Laser Kittens recently, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I actually got to run that this year, and I barely knew what I was doing going in, and it was the most fun I had. It was amazing.
It looks so good.
It's great.
It was actually thanks to you guys I stumbled across it too, because I was going through different Reddit posts and stuff. I was just going through my Reddit history or whatever. And I realized that the reason we found out about the Dread game you guys are running is you guys posted that like, oh, hey, there's some last minute, tickets available to these. Yep. And that's when I would think I was like about to go to bed here. And I was like, oh, I've heard about Dread. This sounds fun. And I just bought 2 tickets without asking Richard. And the next morning I was like, hey, guess what, bro? We're going to do this thing. And then we looked up nothing about it. So it'd be like a big shock. And I think it was in that post, Laser Kittens was also mentioned somewhere. And through that, we started doing more research into the diceless systems and stuff. And yeah, so it all kind of spurred from you guys.
Yeah, and a funny little common denominator between you guys and me as well. Dread was actually the first game that Mike ever ran for me. He just invited me over on a Halloween.
Oh, wow.
And we just played it. I managed to live, shockingly.
I purposely didn't do any research into Dread at all once he told us about it. I was like, I just want to go into this kind of blind. I don't want to know much about it. I just want to have, a fun time and kind of be surprised by it. And it was a very pleasant surprise. It was excellent. I loved it.
That's what I want to hear. We love narrative systems. My background is in math and things like that are very rules and mechanics heavy. And so when I'm gaming, I really like very story-oriented, narrative, rules light, stuff like that, along the lines of Dread and Laser Kittens. World of Darkness kind of plays into that too, but I also like LARP a lot more than, not a lot more, but I also enjoy LARP too, and it's for that same reason. I love simpler, more easy to grasp systems.
That's awesome. It's funny. The majority of the system you guys are playing are ones we don't. But then we're over here, we're playing Cthulhu, and I think you guys mentioned the Power Apocalypse systems. We'll do, we'll play some of those, and D&D is our big thing. We're looking at Starfinder soon and stuff, so it's it's really cool talking to other podcasters that are playing games on like this other end of the spectrum, but like this whole world's just so connected where it still all works out and enjoy games from each other's worlds.
Yep. I actually had a recent experience where one of my coworkers brought me over to his stepfather's house where he and his friends, and we're talking about guys that are like attendees of like the third Gen Con ever. They're still sitting around playing the old tank battle games that inspired D&D. And so I was playing it for the first time and I sat down and one of them looked at me after I made the first move. He was like, yeah, man, you're a gamer. I can see it right here already.
But that's the
such
thing.
High praise.
I know, right?
Like, I will happily sit down and play like D&D 5th edition, maybe some Cthulhu. I'll complain about a throwing skill the whole time we play Cthulhu, but I'll still play it and have a good time. Like, I don't think anyone should be gatekeepy so much that they're like, oh, you mean you're going to write a story and run it for me and let me be a character in it? Like, I'm not
Right.
going to complain about that.
Yep.
Like Blades in the Dark. I don't know, man. I know you've put a lot of work into this, but can we do something else?
Right? If you find someone running Blades in the Dark, you owe that person like everything because that's the best system. It's not the best system, but it's the best system.
It's there. It's getting there. Definitely.
That's the one that I've heard enough about that I have no experience with actually playing. That if that's like top of my list that I want to invest in or at least be a player in next.
It's so good.
Yeah, definitely at least get into like, there's definitely, I'd have to look it back up, but I listened to a podcast of it for a while ago. So.
The Magpies?
Yes, that's it. Thank you.
They're very good.
Yes, they are. I think they switched to another brand name after a while, but I think it's still out there and you can find it.
Oh, yeah, I'll look it up after this. But, maybe instead of Blades in the Dark, maybe you're going to sell me on some Werewolf the Apocalypse?
That's what he's hoping for.
Yeah, I guess we can talk about that too. So,
while we're here.
Yeah.
To give a little bit of our background, because I think that I don't like listening to reviewers who haven't played a game, because I've read reviews from people who didn't play a game and it tells you very little about it. I've been running Vampire the Masquerade V5 since it came out. Prior to that, I had not played Vampire before that, so I am something of a newcomer to the World of Darkness compared to people who have been in the game for longer. But at the same time, I think I understand Vampire V5 very well. And when I look at Werewolf 5th edition, I see a really good evolution of the system. They didn't just take Vampire V5 and find and replace hunger with rage. They really wrote a whole new system. What pulls you in with Werewolf is that it's the D&D of the World of Darkness.
Really? So, would you say that Werewolf would be like the mainstream? Like, would I guess in this analogy, would Vampire be like the Pathfinder?
So Pathfinder versus D&D, you've got some questions of difficulty of mechanics there. And mechanically, Werewolf and Vampire work about the same.
Yeah.
But the difference is that with Vampire, you're this ageless, horrible monster that survives by murdering humans. And it's a terrible headspace to be in. We actually kind of got burned out on Vampire because you're playing this horrible creature for so long and it does get into your head and it feels bad. With Werewolf, you're not a hero because the werewolves of the World of Darkness aren't necessarily humanists. They're not looking to protect humanity because humanity is destroying the world. They're destroying the environment. You're also not an objectively evil monster. So I would say that I'd probably tell people this, but to your point, I would say, yeah, Werewolf is a better starting point in World of Darkness than Vampire.
Yeah, I would agree with that, at least in terms of looking at just playing as a character, because that's mostly of the familiarity I have. There isn't as much complexity with Werewolf 5th edition than there is VTM 5th edition, because one of the things they did, and I'm just looking at my character sheet right now, and this is one thing that jumps out to me. There's a lot more standardization of things that you can do as a guru than as a vampire. When you're making your character in V5, you have to really work to make things specific based off your clan. Meanwhile, in this system, The moon aspect you choose, as well as your tribe, your clan, they help influence how you play things, but there's still a lot of basic things that all of you can do. The big thing is that you have the 4 different forms that you can transform into as a guru. There's a Glabro, Cryon, how do I say it?
I don't know. I've said Krynos since forever.
Yeah, it's probably Krynos.
I think some people say it differently.
Yeah, I just froze on the spot. Hispo and Lupus. And they each give you different abilities and things to do. We're still kind of working out what thing works with the best situation. But the Krynos one is especially overpowered. And because of that, they make it a really difficult form to maintain as well.
So Krynos is the classic hulking 12-foot tall beast that's half wolf, half man, covered in fur and scales and just horrifying to look at. That's the war form that players morph into when they really want to lay down some hurt.
Yeah, and I think I'm the only one that's done it so far.
That sounds right.
Yeah, and it's more difficult to get into. It costs you more rage checks than anything else, and you have to consistently roll every turn to hold the form. Meanwhile, with the other ones, you don't have to do that.
Oh, so you can change into any of those forms as a PC? You don't have to like choose from character creation which one of those you're going with?
They're all available to you.
And that's a huge difference, because with Vampire, your powers are very niche and very edge. And so in Werewolf, you get a lot more of that high power. I'm going to go out and destroy some monsters. I'm going to overthrow some corporations who are committing environmental terrorism. And in Vampire, most of your energy is spent fighting other vampires for political ends.
That's interesting, because I think it was episode 2 or 3 of, I believe 3 of your Vampire the Masquerade podcast, where there's a gentleman in the car who just wants to, he's like, "Hi, you guys need help?" And Clear Visions is just, because of dice, gives in and frenzies and just tears this person up. And I was like, wow, they've already killed a person, and we're only a couple episodes into this. So that's, I guess as players, that would like wear on you after a little while. If you're like, oh, I'm trying to role play someone, that's a good person. Yeah. I might be turned a little bit or whatever. I'm just a good person. Oh no, I just killed somebody.
No, I can totally talk about that point, because as the more and more you'll listen to it, you'll realize that my dice are horrible. I fail all the time, and that carried over into Werewolf, but it wasn't nearly as punishing.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Well, but, I wish better dice upon you, going forward. But at least it's not hurting you as much.
I'll tell you that much.
The thing is, that's built into the World of Darkness. It is true with Werewolf as well. Werewolf has a system where you can move in 2 directions. So Vampire, you can only go down. Yep. And Vampire, you can only become less human, and you just get to a point where human life doesn't matter at all to you. And that's really draining. With Werewolf, you can go in 2 directions. You can either become more rage-filled and just more desperate to fight tooth and claw to defend Gaia, Mother Earth, and protect her from all comers. And so you might really become an eco-terrorist. That's one direction you can go. Or the other direction you can go is becoming completely discouraged and giving up the fight entirely and siding with the forces of destruction. I think that makes for a more complete system, because those are 2... It gives you more options. It's kind of sad when you have someone who wants to play a very humanist vampire, but they just can't, and they're just forced, and the liveliness is drained out of them, and I can see how it leaves kind of I don't want to say damages your psyche, but it is painful to go through, I think.
Yeah, it makes it not fun after a while. Our first campaign of V5, which we didn't record, I played a Thin Blood, and my main goal for the entire campaign was to never lose any humanity. And I did it, but it was really difficult. There were some times where I basically just had to walk away from a choice and be like, nope, I'm not doing that one. You guys have fun with that one. Bye.
Yeah, because you're constantly fighting a losing battle, essentially.
And Werewolf is like that. The premise of Werewolf the Apocalypse W5 is that the apocalypse happened and Gaia lost. And that's sad. Like, you're starting from this position where werewolves have all been backed into a corner and you're just trying to fight your way out to survive another day. And so you're living out a tragedy, but you still have an opportunity to be a hero. You can still gain renown. In Vampire, that just isn't there. In Vampire, the best thing you can do is kill an older vampire who's more of a bastard than you are. And that's it.
You just sold me on Werewolf so hard. That sounds... The premise from beginning is so cool. I love that. Like, just, hey, heads up, everything's already bad. What are you going to do now? Versus, oh, yeah, you're warring with a rival clan. I don't know. There's just... One makes me, like, inspires me more to, like, role play a character and do better and, like, make good choices versus, screw those people.
Yeah, I do. I wish that we had started off as a werewolf podcast instead of a vampire podcast. I think it would have made for better content because no one wants to be the bad guy. Like, you might want to flirt with the edge a little bit, but you don't really want to play a bad character very often.
I'll be honest. I did have some fun with it.
Okay.
I mean, and I was gonna say, hey, don't cut yourself so short. Your podcast, The Vampire, is great, and I'm assuming we're gonna be getting some werewolves, in the coming months.
Yeah. So we did. When I realized that I wanted to give my thoughts on Werewolf, I immediately said, "Hey guys, I know we have this production calendar. Can I shuffle everything up and run one werewolf session?" And then that turned into 2 werewolf sessions.
And it's gonna be a third. And I'm still waiting to finish my Cyberpunk Red game, and
yeah. But it's also
That's so cool.
I will say it's a complicated system. As I have a lot of background in the engine behind Vampire V5, just having looked over it a lot, and also as an aside, I think that the dice engine that runs World of Darkness 5th edition is actually one of the most elegant game designs. I say that with a background in probability, that it's a very good design. Same for Blades in the Dark. It's also a very good design. Those two are what I would say are the strongest, most interesting systems to me. Werewolf keeps that. I really love dice pool systems. I think that they favor the player so much more than systems with a single die. And also, though, it is still difficult to run. I love World of Darkness. I love everything they put out, but their books are written like novels, and it makes it difficult to find rules.
Yeah, we literally spent probably about 15 minutes our last session trying to clarify on one specific thing. We had 3 people here with their new copies of their book flipping through, trying to find the exact point. And then meanwhile, I'm just sitting over here like drumming my fingers like, okay, well, I guess I'll just be on my phone over here.
Interesting. So is it are they filling the book up with like lore and stuff mixed in with the rules, or is it just so rule dense that it's difficult to move through it?
It's not so rule dense. It's the former. It's definitely so much lore and so much background knowledge. They love to write paragraphs about the experience of living as a werewolf, and that's really valuable. Like, that's great information to have.
Absolutely.
Yep.
But the rules are kind of mixed in with that, so you'll get a passage about life as a werewolf in the city along the railroad tracks, and then you'll get a passage right next to it that says, and by the way, this is how the rules for healing work, and then we're going to cut back in, and that can make it very difficult to find information.
Yeah, and the parts about like the clans and everything, this is the main part I've read through so far. It'll go on for at least like 3 or 4 pages talking about background and everything like that, how things have changed over the centuries. And then finally you get to the part where this is what picking this specific clan grants you. This is what will make your character special. So I don't think it's necessarily like a balance issue. I am a lore fiend. Anytime I play a video game, even if I've played it like 5 or 6 times, I still watch all the cutscenes. So it doesn't bother me. But in terms of like quick reference and everything like that, that's the part that there's a little bit of a tricky thing to get into it.
Yeah, it seems like a change in format could really go a long way with this.
Well, and it's just classic World of Darkness. They're a small publishing company compared to someone like D&D or Wizards of the Coast. They're much smaller, And so I like that because it's more personal. I feel like I have more of a personal relationship with the developers, but it does mean that there's more issues with it. Like I've found circular references in the book right now. They have, I forget the rule exactly, but I was trying really hard to figure out a rule and got to a, refer to page 243 when I was on page 243.
Oh no. That's interesting. That Gen Con, we got the privilege to interview Rue Dickey from Pathfinder,
Cool.
and from Paizo, and it was really funny because they really, really sold me on their product as someone coming from, the other team, so to speak. And it was almost exclusively because of how, even though they're not small anymore per se, how they treat their community. So I could definitely see, a smaller company having that cool feeling. I don't know. I guess I don't know what I'm saying, how the best way to put it, but these smaller developers you can kind of connect with, get a little more leeway with some of these small issues.
Right.
Yeah, it's more about being in the know. I don't want to say in the know. It's like being in the club and knowing you have a lot of fellow fans. And there's also with World of Darkness, you have all of the LARP that goes with it. And it's a totally separate system and almost a totally separate community. But the fact that it exists means that it's this larger, broader world that you're all a part of. And I think that just gives it it's special in a different way.
Yeah, my actually the funny thing is my girlfriend, she actually LARPed VTM years before she met me. So she actually has a bit better of a knowledge base of the system than I do, and yet I'm the one on the podcast doing it.
Doing the actual talking about it.
Exactly, yeah.
Yeah, it's weird. I didn't even know that the VTM LARP community existed until I think it was probably about maybe 4 months even before Gen Con. I kind of stumbled into it accidentally, looking through Reddit communities, and I found out that in a city local, near to us, it's an active community of people playing this. And I joined one of their Facebook groups so that I can get more insight on it. And like I said, I didn't even know that. I've known about Vampire the Masquerade for a very long time, but I never knew that that community specifically existed and that it was so strong.
Yeah, and Vampire has a lot of problems with it. Just World of Darkness has a lot of problems. It was written during the 90s, and they included a lot of problematic elements. They've made an effort to fix them over time. I don't know that I can comment on if that effort is sufficient or if they are fixed, but I can say they've made an effort to fix it. But I think that they have such a deep fan base that I don't want to say it's okay, but I don't think it's going anywhere just because they're so beloved. Their content is so beloved that they're going to be around for a long time, and everyone loves to talk about it. Controversy is always, I don't want to say good, but there's no such thing as bad press, and people will talk about World of Darkness forever, I think.
Yeah, it's always going to be a driving force, the controversy that exists.
Yeah, but with Werewolf, they've fixed some of the more problematic stuff. I don't want to get too far into it, but my big hang up with Werewolf used to be how they made new werewolves. They had this awkward system with kinfolk that implied that they were using humans as breeding stock, and all of the horrible things that goes along with keeping humans in basically slavery. And they got rid of that, thankfully. And I think it makes it a much simpler system, easier to work with, easier to go along with, because you're not suddenly playing these oppressive beasts. You're just animals who are fighting to the last for Gaia.
I just want to if we could just stop the interview podcast and just you could just run this game for us right now. Yeah. I'd be super into it. I'm ready to play right now.
All right, man. Roll the character. Let's do it. Yeah, there's some pre-gens.
Let's go.
But yeah, they fixed a lot. I don't want to get too far into it because I think there's better people to comment on it, but they had some real issues with it was the 90s, so they loved to co-opt things from other cultures, specifically native cultures. And it's, again, hard for me to comment on it. But I think that an effort was made to stop doing that. They also, in the 90s, they had a clan that was effectively neo-Nazis, and they got rid of them and made them the bad guys, and that's okay.
Good.
But
yeah, that sounds great.
yeah.
They're making some good choices lately, it sounds like.
Yeah.
Agreed.
Yeah. But there's definitely still outrage that exists, and I think there always will be, just because they have that history of trying to cut towards the darker side of gaming.
Oh, that's a good point. I guess if you've built your system, and your, specific game towards that from the beginning, pull too far away from that, and you might, lose some fan base or hurt their feelings or whatever, but you have to adjust for the times to stay relevant and stop get new people to come in and enjoy the game for what it is now. I hadn't really considered that. I mean, I know Dungeons & Dragons has changed over time, and for the most part, it's been, just simplifying rules. They tried broadening it and making, look how crazy it is, and then let's just simplify it for everybody.
Scale it back.
But we haven't had, I want to say too many controversies. I mean, this year started off with some, and then now we've got AI generated art and other stuff. But, for the most part,
different controversies.
There's not, people being used for stock and stuff. So I guess it's just a little different across the board.
Yeah, and I think World of Darkness should be commended for the efforts they're making. Again, I have no idea if it's sufficient. I know that there are people who are still unsatisfied, and I think they have a leg to stand on. But otherwise, I still think it's clear that they're trying to be more inclusive.
Yeah, and good on them. It's the modern world that's appreciated. So at least they're showing willingness to adapt. And hopefully, what has their release cadence kind of been like for new editions of these systems?
God.
They keep us waiting. Let me say. I mean,
Really?
we were talking about. So we started recording October of 2018, and so we said, okay, we're gonna play through the V5 campaign that we have now, and hopefully by the time we get to this year's Gen Con, we'll know about Werewolf. We'll have the book in hand, everything like that. We got to that Gen Con, absolutely nothing. We got to the next Gen Con, absolutely nothing. Finally, this year, it came out. I mean, part of it was a good thing because we ended up having a longer story to tell in V5 than we expected. How many episodes did we end up doing? Like
41
episodes. And we thought we were going to be done in like 20 at the most. So that was good. And then also it gave us time to examine Hunter the Reckoning as well. And that's the system that appeals to me because there's all this crazy stuff going on in the background, all these powerful individuals, and you're just humans living on the edge of society and just trying to make do and fight back in the best way that you can. But then Werewolf hit. A few of us got their pre-ordered copies, took a look at it, and we were like, okay, we're feeling this one too. It was exactly kind of the thing that we were expecting it to be, in that it was something that was going to be even more fun than the fun we were having before.
Gotcha. So, yeah, you said pre-order copies. So were they giving out pre-ordered copies of the book at Gen Con and then it's released later or recently?
They were. So the pre-orders, actually my PDF of Werewolf was emailed to me the week that Gen Con started. And there was a part of me that wanted to spoil it really hard for everyone and like run a Werewolf the Apocalypse game at Gen Con or for our live show or something. But there was no way no way I was going to make that one happen.
I'm glad you didn't do that.
But otherwise, they had pre-ordered copies to pick up at Gen Con, and then they released it, I think 1 week ago is when the official release was. I'm not totally sure.
That sounds right.
Very recently. And actually, with your editing timeline, I don't know exactly how relevant that 1 week comment is either.
Oh, this will be out for us. Current timeline, this will be out next Tuesday.
Oh, nice.
So,
Okay.
pretty
Close
pretty
enough.
soon.
Next Tuesday. Oh my gosh. You're
And
fast.
let me check myself here. I did say October 2021, right? When we started?
Yes, October 2021.
Good. For some reason, I was thinking 2018 for a
Yeah.
second. I was-
You said 2018. We started playing Vampire in 2018.
yeah, that's right. Okay. Yeah. All right, cool. All right, you can drop that part.
So, Monster Game Night question real quick. So
Sure.
you guys did a live show at Gen Con. Is this something you guys do often? Like these live shows and stuff? Because that's awesome.
I mean, we're looking to do it more. This is the second year we did a live show at Gen Con. We actually had a second one planned that we needed to back out of for various reasons, unfortunately. But yeah, and I have to say both times, at least from a player perspective, it probably was a little more nerve-wracking on Mike's end. But I had an excellent time, especially with the one this year, just being more comfortable coming back to V5 after taking a break and just being able to, excuse the euphemism here, but to get back into the same skin that I played in before that I hadn't touched for a long time. It just was a really rewarding experience overall.
And
That's really cool.
I was going to say, we are working to do another live show soon here. We have a convention. I can't talk about it yet, but we have another convention that we're in talks with to do a live show.
Yep.
And if we can do that, that would be so cool. There's just so much energy from a crowd, and we're small. We're a passion project. We draw about 50 people and we do a live show, so we're little. But doing that in front of an audience, it's like, you guys are going to sit here and watch us bicker in character and play dice games and give each other a hard time. And people enjoy it. Like, not everyone gets to be a part of an ongoing campaign. And so I think that watching and being included in that experience makes for a really special environment. It's just so much fun.
That's, first off, you say, it's passion product small. 50 people, that's really cool. We attended a D&D / Pathfinder event at Gen Con, and as audience members, and it was in the world of TikTok and YouTube, star-studded cast, and I think they only had 50 people.
Yeah.
So, hey,
that's huge.
That's great.
Yeah, bring it on.
Yeah, I honestly can't say how I would do in a live show. I think I think about it and I was like, yeah, I could probably do a live show. And then I think about it and I was like, I don't know if I could do a live show. I don't know if I could step into one of my characters in front of 50 people.
The thing is, once you get once you've got some practice behind you, you're used to being on mic and everything like that. It's, at least for me, it's something that you can easily slip back into, no problem. So you might do a little better than you think.
I spend the first 5 minutes being terrified and talking really quickly, but that may not be true for Ben.
That's not true. You only like 2 this time. You're getting better.
I used to play music live in front of people for years, and every single show for years, the first song or two, I was vibrating.
Yeah.
I could have just vibrated off the front of the stage if I wasn't tied back with a cable. So I could imagine opening yourself up and role-playing a character and just, performing live in front in that sense, and not stuff that you've practiced hours and hours over and over and over again, how that would be even more nerve-wracking.
Yeah, and part of the problem for me is that, especially at least the character that I made for V5 this time, he's not family friendly at all. So I'm basically like having to completely cut loose, which is fine with me because most of the time I have to be pretty like prim and proper, both professionally and around a lot of people. So getting able to cut loose like that in front of people, that probably helped my enjoyment, to be honest.
That's sick. So none of the conventions or anywhere you've performed live so far have had you like, hey, hold on a minute, maybe careful what you say a little bit. They just, have let loose, have fun.
And we're pretty explicit about the fact that we're not family friendly and we're 18 plus. So they haven't had any problem with it so far.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll say you're very upfront. That's actually one of the things I thought was cool about your podcast so far, even from where I'm at. Like, just at the beginning, you're very upfront about, hey, this is not for kids. Adults, there's a list of all, the warnings and everything. That's super cool. I don't see a lot of even larger scale productions and stuff doing the due diligence of putting that information out there. Yeah. And the fact that you guys get it out of the way, like right out the door, that's really cool and good on you guys.
Yeah, Mike's paranoia about getting canceled is very helpful.
That's not what it is.
I know, I'm kidding.
I don't want someone to listen with their kids in their car and hear me describing somebody having their intestines torn out.
Fair enough.
As someone with kids, yeah, thank you. That's really nice of you and very thoughtful to do that.
Yeah, headphones, please. for Monster Game Night headphones.
Richard and I, we're like, don't not curse, but if you do curse, I'll just bleep it. And I think, out of the 28 episodes or whatever we've done so far, Richard's never cursed, and I curse like at least every other episode.
Hey,
and I'm always like, dang it, me. I'm only having to go through and edit these out because of me, my own dang mouth.
It's a hard choice though, because this isn't really interesting to your listeners, but
well, we'll see.
No, and nothing. Most things we say aren't.
Hey,
I was going to say, yeah, we do that all the time. Every week we talk about things that aren't interesting for our listeners.
I'm one of your listeners, and I think you're very interesting.
Agreed.
But this is why it's discussion. This is how it goes.
Also, I'm listening to myself, and I am very interesting. Anyway.
See?
I'm just sitting here.
You have to choose between being 18 plus or not 18 plus, because Apple Podcasts won't list you on trending, on new and notable, if you are 18 plus. And I'm okay with that, because I don't want to feel like I'm trying to steal my way into someone's life. And I'm okay with having a smaller show that is adult oriented, because then I don't have to go in and question, okay, there's a really dark scene where someone dies here, and do I need to cut that out to hit, a parental safety rating? But I definitely understand the other way. One of my friends is running a family-friendly D&D podcast, and I commend him for it, but it creates a ton of extra work on his end, and he has to aim for that quality from the outset. You can't just record whatever you would like and then at the end go back and patch it.
Yeah, and my preference as a player would be to have the most freedom possible, to go where we feel like the story needs to go.
Yeah, I guess every once in a while I run games for my two kids, and we have and they're not even like tiny kids. They're in like that middle range, and they use the imagination backpack where they don't even have to learn rules heavy systems. They just, everything they can think of using is 2d6. And they're like, oh, I pull out Cloud's Buster Sword, or I pull out a cheetah,
nice,
and I ride it into battle. And I'm like, cool, roll me 2d6. And they've got a d12 for health, and we just play and run it. And even then, they're like, all right, I hit this goblin. I'm like, cool. And you take this giant sword, and it bisects him completely in two against this tree, and then the tree falls. Oh, you're very young.
Bonk him on the head.
And then he explodes into confetti. This is something that has actually happened. I'm not making this up.
I believe it.
You are the best father ever.
That's awesome.
So even then, I'm like, I catch myself like going back to my like actual home game D&D roots. So being recorded doing that, yeah, oh man, like that's something that we're really gonna have to talk about when we, or if hopefully when, fingers crossed, we start doing live plays. Like, do we just go all in, I guess, like that on the channel, or do we attempt to separate somehow? I don't even know where to begin with that. I guess
it would depend on the system too, because like Werewolf and Vampire don't really lend themselves to
cute and cuddly.
A cute and cuddly podcast.
They do not. You could maybe make it happen, but I'd have to see the outcome of that, because I don't think you could.
It'd be interesting to see how long the episode and the story is.
Yeah.
Also, what do you mean when? We're going to play Werewolf together. You just told me.
Yes.
We're going to play Werewolf.
You're backing out on us? What is this?
No. I just meant games I'm going to be running. Then I got to be worried about what I'm saying. But as a player, yeah, let's do it.
Cool. Yeah, no, I will tell you guys, the fact that you're even thinking about going down this route and doing some actual plays, I get the feeling you're going to do it for sure. And I think it's going to turn out well. I mean, you guys are experienced role players. You've been doing it for a long time, so you're familiar with systems and everything like that. Getting it translated into an audio format, the one thing that it has been interesting about that, for me at least, is I have to think about both what I would do as a player and then what also is the kind of content that I would want to hear. So my one suggestion about that, if you're interested in some advice, if not, you can cut this part.
Of course.
Is just think about playing a character that you at least would be interested in listening to.
Mm-hmm. Oh no, that's actually really wonderful advice. we've had players in games that have just stalled in the spot because they're like, oh, I don't actually have anything for this. And it's like, oh, well, why not? And they're like, well, I made my character for this idea I had, but I really don't have anything for any of these situations. And I'm like, well, why'd you make your character like that? They're like, well, I wanted to do this, but my actual personality is coming out and I'm not role-playing my character anymore. I want to be efficient because I'm a gamer.
Yeah.
But I'm battling myself now. And that's happened a couple times in our games with different players. And yeah, I guess the idea of like, all right, guys, we're in this for potentially, many episodes. Get it right, please. Let's do some, session zeros. Maybe you're comfortable with your character. Yep. Are you sure? So yeah, that's really good advice. Me, I'm confident. I'm going to nail it no matter what. Knock it out of the park. No issues whatsoever.
Totally.
Richard, on the other hand, we'll see.
Well, in World of Darkness is all about playing anti-heroes. Every character in World of Darkness is an anti-hero because that's how it's designed, is the world is falling apart around you. It is a parallel universe where everything is just 30% worse and 30% more evil, and that's the part that it highlights. But I think that draws out some cool stuff from people. I mean, I can complain about how it wore on after a while. I think that 42 episodes was too many because I should have wrapped it up faster, and that was my failure as a storyteller and not nailing the pacing. But people can get so far into their character because they're not one-dimensional.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So just to peek behind the curtain really quick, my character, Tommaso Galenti, he was basically built to be the one that was combat proficient out of the group. I mean, we had another one that was a Banhu Hakim assassin, stuff like that, but he was the one that was supposed to be able to take punishment. He did end up taking a lot of punishment, but also it developed where he was the one that was actually the most kind of in touch with the ruling class. He was the one that had an understanding, and we would, like, for example, we'd roll up to Kingsport where the prince was, and Tommaso was the one that understood that we needed to ask permission to enter and that we were probably going to get denied permission to enter because of something we'd done earlier in the story. And we were granted something. And I was the one that had to tell everybody else, hey, pay attention to this. They're testing us to make sure we can figure this out properly. And then that's how we get in. So that was a dimension that I didn't necessarily expect for him to have. I was just like, oh, I'll just take this one dot in etiquette because it makes sense that that's how he presents himself to get by, because he's this like loose cannon. That's why they keep him around. But it ended up being like a really integral part of the story as well.
It's the very first Dungeons & Dragons campaign I ever played in. I bring him up all the time in the podcast. Rudolph Tashar, Dragonmore Paladin. I started him off as a joke. And really, I used to listen, still would if they kept making more, the Acquisitions Incorporated C Team. And there was a Dinar Blitzin. So still just reindeer names. So I was like, I also want to be this person. Mm-hmm. So I reindeer named my character. And I'm like, I'm going to be a goofball and everything just like him. And give it 50 or so sessions. I was nothing like him. Had a very complete character arc. And have never loved a character in any kind of medium more in my entire life than this character my brain spit out. And I reference him all the time because he's very dear to my heart. In fact, I had art commissioned for him and I need to hang it up somewhere in the studio.
Yeah, you definitely
That's so cool though.
So it's funny how you start up a campaign or something with the character in mind, and little tiny things can completely like veer your character off, and sometimes, ways, and sometimes super exciting, interesting ways.
Yep.
And I'm playing, and Ben is running Cyberpunk Red for us. I impolitely interrupted with a Werewolf the Apocalypse interlude.
Right.
It's still 1 or 2 sessions to finish at most. It's not terrible.
But I'm so attached to my character in that game.
He really shockingly is. It's kind of amazing.
Is this something you guys like? I don't want to spoil anything for any of the players. Is this something that could potentially like pick up again with more one-shots and such like that? Or is this kind of going to be it?
No, I'm intentionally planning on ending it on a cliffhanger that could potentially dovetail into a full campaign, if that's something we end up coming back to. I mean, part of the thing is I've never sat and I've actually never written out a campaign. This is honestly one of my first experiences GMing ever. I've just picked it up and tried to throw it out there on the podcast and see what happens.
It's so unfair because Ben is an awesome game master. Like out of nowhere, I'm kind of jealous because I'm watching him run games. I'm like, holy shit, I shouldn't swear on this podcast. Holy crap. Ben,
No, you're fine.
you are so good. Just from sitting down and from the moment he opens his mouth, I'm like, you are an incredible game master. You should have been running this show since the outset.
Well, I do have two unfair advantages. I do have experience as an amateur actor, and a big part of my professional life is running lots of different meetings. So I have both of those together, and I'm used to preparing notes beforehand. So all of that kind of gets together. It's just like the number crunching and the mechanics is the part where I really need to brush up on.
This is one I came up with so many questions during that. I think I forgot like 13 of them, but the couple points I do remember. One, if you curse, no worries. I don't want you to like change up how you would normally speak. I got this. This is what I do. This is why I'm
There
here.
you go.
Two, this reminds me of Richard. It's not recorded. It's not on anything, but our Monster of the Week games that we've done. I remember the first time he pitched it, he was like, it's a 1-shot. And I'm like, okay, bet. And then it was a 2-shot and quickly became a 3-shot. And I was like, when it finished, I was like, in what world was this going to be done in one night?
Exactly.
Madman. And I don't know how long it was in between, maybe like a year, maybe at least months and months. We did come back to it and we did a second, game, session 4, I guess. And that one he did wrap out in 1. And it was great. Every single one of these games has been so good. And he'll sit here on the podcast, hand on a Bible, on a microphone to the mouth, and tell me he's a bad, game master. And he's just lying to everyone. I can't believe the fact that he's lying to me, to my face, it's insulting.
Rude.
Truly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Exactly.
I mean, my main goal, and I sat down and I told them this before we started, I said, I just want this to be fun. I'm going to try to rule of cool as much as I can. I won't argue back too much. Just let me know if I'm messing up on any mechanics or anything like that, and let's do it.
Yeah. Cyberpunk, rule of cool that's got to be like that's got to be in the book, right?
Pretty much, yeah.
Like
Surely. Somewhere. I'm sure I could find it.
Yeah, that's pretty much all Monster of the Week is. It is very light on rule system, so it's all about having fun and having a good narrative time, which is why I find it easy to run and enjoyable to run.
Yeah, I'm going on a friend's bachelor weekend next weekend, and I'm going to run a Powered by the Apocalypse game. I'm going to run Worldwide Wrestling RPG for them. I am so excited.
Oh, wow.
So excited for that one.
another one I've heard good things for.
Yeah, exactly. And it's got that same narrative transfer system as Laser Kittens, where you start off, you book one show, and then you pass it along to somebody else to book the next show. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to that one a lot.
I'd have a lot more time to play games if I wasn't doing this podcast. This is why we need to get the live plays and the actual plays going, because I need an excuse to
Just
play
more
more
game playing.
games.
Yeah.
You're
That's
not
the best
wrong.
part of the 60-second game reviews, because we're looking at actual bookshelves full of unopened games in some instances, and we're like, we got to have at least one game to review every week. Guess we're gonna have to play it.
Work through that inventory.
It's like, dang.
Yeah, Mike has that same problem. Since I only did my first full Gen Con this year, I'm only starting to have that problem.
I don't have a
Oh,
problem.
this is our first also.
Yeah.
One of my rules is I try not to buy games when I have unplayed games on my shelf, and I have a few unplayed games on my shelf right now.
Well, you're also not counting like your Steam collection and stuff like that.
No, that's a totally different problem.
That's my massive.
Oh, yeah, I don't even like my Steam library. I don't like looking at that.
God.
It's depressing. That backlog is too deep.
Yep.
No.
I wish you could have seen the face Richard made when you said that you try not to buy games when you would have unopened games, because we both know we have for sure more unopened games, or at least unplayed games, than played games.
Yeah,
at
I
this
have
point.
so many unplayed games. It's
It's a problem.
Yeah. Oh, see, there you go.
Yep.
Yeah, my another one of my friends who, fortunately, it also has been going to Gen Con for a while. He's a colleague at work as well as a friend, and their primary focus is board games. And they basically this year, they just sat in the games library pretty much the whole time. So I ended up buying like a 1-day ticket and going in there and hanging out with them a couple different times just to get in on like one game when I had a break between running things. And I do want to get more of a balance of doing that next year. The one thing I missed out on this year was actually being able to sit in and play in an RPG. Like that's the one thing. Well, I did that one, which was, because that was the one you skipped because you needed to go to bed. It was,
Blood on the Clock Tower?
Blood on the Clock Tower. Thank you. Yeah, the social deduction game. That one was
Yeah,
really
I saw
fun.
a lot of that. Yeah.
Yeah.
I ran a lot of LARPs at Gen Con, and it was fabulous. And everyone should go to Gen Con and participate in a LARP because it will make you a happier, more well-rounded, and healthier human being.
You heard that here from Monster Game Night.
You can quote me on that.
Mike, did you like ever go to the exhibit hall? It sounds like you literally just were running events
I
the
can promise
entire
you
time.
he went to the exhibit hall. I saw him there at least twice.
I spent
Okay.
a total of 20 minutes in the exhibit hall, and I spent all of it handing out swag. So
Yeah, we did those Rice Krispie treats you guys got. We get a lot of those.
So, fun fact. One of the other players gave me their Rice Krispie treat as well. They're like, oh, this is for what you did at the end. You're a good son. I was like, oh, thanks, Dad. And when the power was out and I had no food in the fridge, I ate those Rice Krispie treats.
Yes, nice.
you are welcome.
Got him through the hurricane.
We're
You
glad
nourished me.
we're glad to provide. Trust me.
Thank you so much.
We bought 500 Rice Krispie treats before Gen Con.
Yeah, we still have some. Do you guys want us to send them down?
I mean, if you wouldn't mind, I'm not sure it's worth it for the postage, but we will devour them.
Yeah.
So up to you.
All right, we'll keep it in mind.
Just save them for next year. We'll run into you at some point. We're gonna have to attend your live show if nothing else.
Oh, totally, yeah.
Well, and it was the first year we had anything resembling a merch budget that we were like, okay, we can spend money on the show. And I was like, let's spend a lot of money on a lot of things. And everyone was like, Mike, that's a terrible idea. And I said, no, it'll be fine.
We will be paring back just a little bit next year. Just a little bit.
What? You can't say that now. Next year, I'm sure you'll bring it up. I mean, the koozies alone, I was like, this marketing is so good. One, their logo is great. Two, it's also Gen Con. So it's Gen Con swag as well as Monster Game Night Podcast swag. Like, that's so smart.
I'm legally
And then the
required to
simple
tell
things
you
like snacks.
that's not the Gen Con logo.
Yes, we made sure not to do that.
Imitated the Gen Con logo
Oh, my gosh.
because we didn't have permission to use the Gen Con logo.
Yeah. Gen Con staff, if you're listening, we did not rip off your logo.
We didn't
promise.
use your logo.
Wow, I should have seen it sooner. I can't believe, but wow, now that I think of it, obviously is not the logo. My bad.
I am reasonably good at design work. Not great. Don't look too closely, but I'm okay at it.
Yeah. Well, we guarantee you one thing. There's going to be more koozies.
Oh, yeah. Those were so easy to give out. Like, you walk around Gen Con with koozies and people just, like, tackle you and take all of them from you.
Yeah. So you guys
Koozies.
you guys 3D printed your cards, right?
Oh yes, yeah. I 3D printed QR codes essentially
That's
that would
awesome.
go to our links. So that was just something like last minute because that's what I do a lot of weird 3D printing in like all mediums and stuff like that.
Very
for
cool.
The other stuff that I do, other hobbies. So it's kind of like a last minute. I was like, I'm gonna 3D print a bunch of keychains to give out at Gen Con.
This man, I'm up on top of my bookshelf right now. There's the bottom half of the jaw of a dragon, and every single tooth is removable, and it's a different die.
Wow.
What?
And
That is
he painted
amazing.
it to look like bone. I'll have to send you a picture of it. It is
Yeah, please do.
remarkable. And I'm like, I don't want to roll these teeth because I don't want to mess up the paint job, but it's gorgeous. So it's presented right on the top of the shelf for all to see.
That's awesome.
And it's always like, oh, that's cool, like little bottom half of a draw. I'm like, yeah, and it's functional. So it's crazy, this stuff. Because I went on, for the cards I had on me, I went on Vistaprint and just like, oh, cool, logo on one side, QR other side, neat. And Richard's like, I can do you one better. I could just make it, and it's gonna be way cooler than anything you could pay for.
Yep. That's so
I don't want to be cool. Yeah, it's always neat because I do all the editing and stuff on this side, and Richard will be like, yeah, you did all the editing for this. I'm like, yeah, but you're making the really cool stuff, man. Like, it doesn't matter that I'm just looking at a timeline doing this stuff, you're doing like really neat things and handing people things. It's just so cool what you're doing, bro.
Yeah.
I love it.
It is hard. Like the handing out swag is actually weirdly difficult because you want to be engaging, but you don't want to be weird. Like I want to give you free stuff, but I want you to remember me, but I don't want to come across as like a greasy used car salesman.
Yeah.
After the Game of Dread, me and Richard, we were waiting in line for another show, and I was mentioning to him, I was like, that was so genius of like, here, I'm going to make a great impression. I'm going to run. I'm the DM of this or GM of this one game. I'm going to run a game for you. And at the very end, surprise, I run a moderately successful podcast. Here's a swag bag. And I'm like, that's so smart. And everything in it was so good. Snacks and like merch that looks good, the swag. And I was like, this is really cool.
That's the mistake I made. I did the spiel up front.
Ooh, no.
Yeah, I got to remember that for next year.
That's the issue. Well, I didn't because it's that I do think I'm genuinely good at running games. I've been doing this since the 6th grade. So if I'm not good at it by now, then I just need to quit. But I think I'm genuinely good at running games. It's not, I've just had so much practice that even if I was the worst at it, like I've had so much more exposure to it that by now I have to be decent. Mm-hmm. And so I kind of would rather show someone what they'll be getting into than try to sell them up front and be like, now keep up. I promise I'm really good.
I mean, I did take their tickets. So at least there was that. They were stuck at the point. Just saying.
And that's a really good point. Because even when on the drive home, we started listening to your podcast, and just right away we're like, yeah, that's how Mike ran our game. Like it's very similar. Like you have this good attribute where you'll just respectfully sit back, let the players do their thing, and when they finally shut up, you step in seamlessly and take over. At no point are you like interrupting to get your like push your story forward. You just let the players do their thing and see what happens. And then if they make bad decisions, punish them.
I am a punishing GM, and I don't feel that bad about it, actually.
He claims him, but
I killed one of my. He's not on the podcast. He's on season 2 of the podcast, but I killed one of his characters in our very first session, and I still have him named Chris the Dead Paladin in my phone.
That's so good. Well, is there, as far as Werewolf goes, was there anything else you guys? Is there anything else you guys wanted to bring up? I mean, you sold me on it, so which means you've probably sold others. But was there anything we definitely wanted to get into this?
I've got a couple of things that I did want to say. One is that something that you'll notice if you look back through World of Darkness games is that the artwork is not very good. In Werewolf, it's pretty good. It's definitely a step up. But it's still like, I don't like it because it goes from this cool, like semi-realistic cinematic style to like super cartoonish, like one page apart. And that feels weird to me. Like there's no D&D book that ever does that.
I mean, but like you said, the different size of the teams, like you've got entire art departments for Wizards. And like I said, one of the most recent books, they're having to do a reprinting now because AI generated art, slipped through that supposedly wasn't supposed to be allowed. And, that's kind of a hot topic right now. And you've got like full teams and stuff like that's getting through, like funky looking characters with multiple like bent fingers and stuff. And no one caught that. And I mean, yeah, it's you got this ginormous company eating like all this market share. And of course, their art and everything, that has to look good. Like if it didn't, imagine the backlash. We kind of saw it this last month.
Yeah. I didn't hear it, so I didn't realize that AI-generated art had made its way into D&D. That's kind of crazy.
Yeah, it was an artist they had many years, like I think it was over a decade of service from. And just, I guess for this book, whether to, ease his workload or something, I'm not 100% sure. He put some pieces in that were AI-generated or at least AI-assisted. And there were, noticeable funky bits on the design, and it was interesting that like the art department at WotC didn't catch it. It was the fans, and it was like shortly after Gen Con where because you were able to buy the book early. I think we were like driving home and we had heard about it already, And we're like, oh, wait, what? Like, no one caught this? And it's like, all right, well, maybe it's difficult to catch. It's like, yeah, but you have so many people whose job it is to go over this stuff. Why didn't anyone catch this? Or did they not care and they're trying to sweep it under the rug? We may never know. Now, supposedly, they're a little more firm on it and they're going to really crack down on it to make sure no one ever does it again. But I don't know. We'll see.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, you know about the werewolf artwork controversy that happened, that it's very clear that one of the artists they had was using photos of native people, that he was copying them and making them into characters in Werewolf. And that was a problem. I'm sure, I hate to say it, I love World of Darkness. I would not be shocked to find out that there is AI generated art in here.
Oh, sure.
It wouldn't surprise me.
And it doesn't personally bother me if they're upfront with it.
Mm-hmm.
It's when the companies just don't say anything. They credit an artist, as like normally, and then it's like, oh, really? The artist may have not actually done this, and then they try to sweep it. Oh, this actually what? Oh, total accident. It just be upfront if you're going to do it. Then I at least know what I'm getting myself into and such. I mean, computers can make some pretty cool looking art. I'm not going to say they don't.
Yeah, but
don't try to pass it off as work that someone sat down and did themselves.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and that's like, I've used Midjourney to make character art for myself to get into character, and I love it, and I'm obsessed with it because it's so cool to be able to do. But I completely agree with your point. I don't want to be charged as though an artist needed to be paid when in fact they didn't.
Right. Weird world we live in right now.
Yeah. Well, but then on the other side of it, so I know I just said I wouldn't be surprised if Werewolf has AI generated art in it just because of the size of the team. It's actually a little short on artwork. Like, there's a lot of, like, the D&D monster manual is great about giving you a picture of the monster and a description of it so that when you're running your game, you can say, this is what an owlbear looks like, and you can describe this monstrosity with a snapping beak and all that stuff.
Oh, yeah.
But in Werewolf, there's all these monsters and spirits, and they've got a huge list of monsters. Like, I love the number of enemies that Werewolf the Apocalypse includes, but they don't have pictures of them.
Yeah, we were fighting something specific when we were playing 2 weeks ago, and one of us just asked Mice, like, so what does this thing look like? Does it have arms? And he had to sit there and go, I don't know. There isn't a picture in here. I have no idea. And we even tried to like Google it and stuff, and we were like, this is kind of tricky.
Interesting. They don't give any kind of like descriptions for it, like before the stats and stuff like that?
They kind of do, but like Game Master brain takes over and you've got like 4 other things in your mind and you're like, description, let me vomit a description out. And then suddenly just kind of, GameMaster.exe has crashed and you've got a problem.
Illustrations, please let us use our eyes, not just for reading.
I've gotten, at least with our home games, I've gotten pretty good, at least during combat, of just kind of saying something and then at the end of the game looking it up and being like, oh, I was wrong. Hey guys, going forward,
what are you talking about?
Exactly what I said.
This has never happened to me.
I basically accidentally homebrewed the tie system in Cyberpunk Red. So I was just like, no, it makes more sense to me this way. We're doing it this way.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. I could do a whole, in fact, if we haven't already, I'm going to have to do a whole podcast on homebrew one day, just the things we've changed in our home games, because
that'd be excellent.
I keep I keep an update or an up-to-date printed and laminated list of homebrew rules, as well as the timeline for our home games, because so far all of our home games have taken place in the same world, just over the period of like centuries. So every time we finish a game or start a new one, I put where each one is in the timeline, so the characters have an idea for, how to make their character and what knowledge they would have of the land. And the first thing, if someone new comes over to play, I'm like, and here's our list of homebrew rules.
Throw the binder in front of them.
Yeah. It's just getting bigger every year.
Of course.
So it's definitely come in handy,
But that's the dream. That's so cool.
That is very cool.
You think about it like, okay, there will be nursing homes where we are playing D&D. Like, I'm looking forward to that.
Oh, that's going to be great. Finally, sweet release from work and can just do what I want to do.
Yep.
That's all I want in my retirement.
Yet related, when you guys have played Werewolf, with this new edition, right? Have you found the book lacking in any way as far as like rules or anything that you had to homebrew on the fly? Or is it pretty straightforward and pretty well laid out right now?
It's hard to find stuff. I know I got into that earlier, and then there's rules that don't exist. There's a balefire exists in this world, and it's fire but sticky and scary. And it's such an iconic part of Werewolf because it relates to the lore.
Yeah, it exists to harm werewolves.
And there is not a single line describing how it functions in the entire book. So I kind of had to homebrew something on the spot because there are enemies armed with balefire.
Yeah, he lit me on fire, and then we weren't sure if we could put it out, actually.
Wow. And was that something where you're like, oh, it has to be in here. Let me flip through
he
all
said
the
that.
pages. And it just...
Yeah, he literally said
Really?
that. He said, I know it's in here. Hold on. And he was like, it's not.
I actually went back to Werewolf W20 to look for rules on that to try to adapt them on the fly to V5, and I still wasn't able to get something really great. So, yeah.
Interesting. We just played, board game, Queen by Midnight, I think it was last week we played it, and we ran into an issue. I think it was like turn 2. I didn't have anything I could play. It's like deck builder style, and you've got a resource to spend to get new cards and stuff. And I couldn't use the cards I had. And since I couldn't use the cards I had, I couldn't get currency to get more cards. I was like stalled completely at like turn 2. And we flipped through the whole rule book on the PDF version, the hard copy, everything, and we couldn't find anything for like a discard mechanic. And we're like, okay, everything about this game is there's so much thought put into everything. What do I do right now if we don't homebrew a discard mechanic right now on the fly? So that's what we had to do, and we did, and then everything worked great from then on out.
Nice.
But sometimes it's little things like that where was that supposed to be like, oh, of course you can discard at the end of your turn. Why wouldn't you? It's a game with cards. Or did they forget? Or is there not supposed to be one and we just broke something? I don't know how, but it's funny how these things can just slip by. Like, that's interesting. Like a prevalent thing in this world has been, and there's nothing for it. Interesting.
Yeah, I think that comes down to, and this is me stealing a bit of Mike's thunder, one of his points, but definitely it seems like there's a tendency for people to play test who are familiar with things. And so that's how you miss something. Like one of the things I heavily get involved with at work occasionally is testing out systems. And I always try to like think outside of the box and try to find a way to break something. So I think that's something that does potentially get overlooked. And it's just kind of a natural human thing to be like, oh yeah, I mean, this totally makes sense to me. It'll make sense to other people.
Yeah, no, that's a good point.
Yeah, but outside of the lack of balefire, there's nothing else that has stood out for you guys for Werewolf. Everything else seems pretty tight.
I think so. I think overall, I think it would be difficult to run if you don't have time to do your homework.
Yeah.
I think that it's a game that you need to sit down and you need to read the source book, and then you need to either use the chronicle that they start you off with, or you need to do a lot of reading on WikiFan or FanWiki and get a lot of background in the system before you start trying to write something, because werewolves have this cool dual existence, that they have a spiritual existence and a corporeal existence. And running that kind of spirit realm, the Umbra, is very, very difficult if you have no idea what it's supposed to be. And I think that if you're like a new game master, generating that on the spot is going to be very, very hard. But there's a lot of content out there about it. You just have to immerse yourself in it for long enough. Frustratingly, because Werewolf is a smaller system, I have not found a single good Werewolf the Apocalypse podcast. I've found one or two, but they fizzle out after a while. And so it's not something where you can just listen to it and get an idea of the setting. And the book doesn't really do you any favors on understanding the Umbra very well. And that's half of the game is happening in the Umbra.
Yeah, and just to go off of that from the player perspective, I mean, I have absolutely almost no concept of what it should look like, how it should function, or anything in my mind's eye. Like, you talk about splitting a portal and walking into it. Thankfully, I'm not thinking straight Avengers portal, but kind of similar thinking along that path. And then just how we're interacting with the creatures in there and everything like that. I'm still having trouble thinking about exactly what they would look like. I mean, one of the things that jumped into my mind instantly, and this is just because topical, is the blight creatures from Tears of the Kingdom. And I'm like, no, get that out of here. I'm not doing that. Like, let's figure something else out. But so that's just something I need to sit and immerse myself more in to get a better idea of it.
Mm-hmm. Oh, I meant to ask this earlier, actually. So totally unrelated to everything you've just been saying, but just because if I don't ask, I won't remember. As someone who hasn't played any of these Worlds of Darkness, system games, are they tied together at all? Like, is Vampire in the same world as, Werewolf Apocalypse, like so many years later or something like that? Or is it all just separate and it's just a game system and I'm overthinking things?
They are in the same world, and the 5th editions of things, they could mix in together, and you can even see a handful of crossover organizations and entities. Mm-hmm. To give a really simple example, the vampires are hunted by the Second Inquisition. The Second Inquisition also has an arm that is hunting werewolves. So there is some crossover there. There are some characters that exist in both lines. And it would not be difficult to adapt, because I'm doing this actively.
Right.
When I wrote our Bluegrass by Night setting, I left myself breadcrumbs to run a werewolf game in the future because I expected Werewolf V5 to be out in like 12 months after I wrote all of it.
Right.
But it wouldn't be difficult to bring that in. At the same time, they're not meant to be run like concurrently.
Yeah.
A party with werewolves and vampires would be a very odd thing. You could make it work if you homebrewed enough, but W5 and V5 would be better at it than prior editions, but still not well suited. But the overarching World of Darkness is still the same.
Interesting. Like, I'm glad it wasn't a dumb question then, because I was like, I'm gonna ask this, and they're gonna be like, no, you idiot.
Well, because everyone has seen Underworld, and they're like, oh my God, I want to do that. And I'm like, that's so cool. Yeah, we should do that. And then actually it turns out that's really hard to do.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, even in Underworld, the goals of the vampires and the werewolves are completely different. So having that kind of cooperation between any kindred and any of the Guru would be very odd, and something that would need to be pretty heavily explained to kind of go down that path. For example, we had, and you guys have probably even heard this part, is we had the antagonistic werewolves right at the start of our campaign.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then
on
at the
motorcycles, it was awesome.
Sniffs the exhaust.
Mm-hmm, exactly. And then at the end of our last Gen Con live show, we also dropped a hint about Hunter Cell as well. So there's definitely some connectivity that we're trying to work to build there, but it's a loose connectivity.
Yeah.
I like it. I mean, it's I guess, like I said, I have the whole like timeline for our games written up. I'm always sprinkling like teeny little things. I think one of the very beginning of our current Strahd, Chris Strahd home game, featured prominently Richard's old character from that game I mentioned where I had the Dragonborn. He was like, it was the rogue he was playing, and he's at the end of that game. He was like, I think my character would go back, because they went back in time like thousands of years. And he's like, I think I would go back and start a school. And I'm like, oh, neat. Let me remember this for years and put it in my own game.
Very nice.
That's so cool.
It's affected so many things.
Yeah. So when I first joined, they were playing their second big D&D campaign. They'd played a first one where the final session has actually never happened. And you might
give that away for free. Why would you share that?
It's not getting recorded. I mean, come on. But the reason I bring it up is because in the second one, he was linking back to the people's original characters, and they were all reacting. Like, one of them was like, we broke into this library, and there was a massive statue of like one of the guys that wasn't with us at the time. and everything, and everyone's going, oh, that son of a bitch, he doesn't deserve it, and everything like that. And I was just sitting there like, this is like my second session with the group, and I'm like, well, okay, there we go. Glad they're having fun.
But that's what's special about tabletop gaming, is building up that momentum.
Yeah.
Even if there's only 5 people in the world who care about that lore, it's still really special.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. I know at least with our listeners, they may not be happy when I get to the cliffhanger I have planned, but it's happening, and I know at least a few will care about it.
Yeah.
That's so cool. That's what is it like to have a live play and just know that there are people out there following along with your story instead of just being
anticipating this stuff.
Yeah, it's not just a private, even though it's super cool and everyone at the table remembers these stories forever. Just knowing there are people out there listening and enjoying it and waiting on the next episode to see what you guys do. What is that like?
It's crazy. It's weird and it's crazy because usually you're writing stuff and it's just for yourself. And then suddenly you talk to someone and they make a reference to an NPC or a character. And I'm like, oh my God, someone else is listening to these stories outside of my head. And then it's wild. And it gives it more momentum because there's motivation now to make things cohesive and coherent. I can't just hand wave and say, okay, guys, can we just forget that all of that happened and let me pick up the story from a point where I'm comfortable? It adds some pressure and that's cool. And I don't know. It's just like, again, we're not big, but we had a decent sized crowd. We had people asking for autographs, which I was like, oh my God.
Yeah, that was pretty cool.
Do you know that I'm just nobody? And you're listening to me and I feel like you're doing me a favor by listening to me. But it's affirming to know that people listen to the story and they think it's worth following along with. But God, it's weird. It's crazy. It's like, these are ideas in my head and now you're talking about them.
Yeah. Like, for example, my girlfriend was not invested in any type of role playing at all. She'd done those LARPs years ago and she was like, I didn't like it that much, so I've left it behind and everything. I did not expect her to get as invested in the story as she did. But as soon as she started listening, she was locked in. And she would ask me questions about like, well, how'd this actually happen at the table and everything like that. And I was like, okay, yeah. All right, that's pretty cool. So getting that kind of direct feedback and knowing that something we're doing is at least entertaining someone else is a motivation to keep going. Knowing that there are people out there that would be disappointed if we were just like, nah, we're not having fun with this anymore. Forget it. It helps to give us the proper motivation to continue on, try to present interesting things.
That's so awesome.
Yeah, so long as you guys keep telling compelling stories, we'll keep listening.
Exactly.
Yeah. And hopefully you get some more listeners just, coming from this to there. And believe me, word of mouth is amazing. I've been telling anyone I know who's into this kind of thing about you guys because, like I said earlier on, like your production value is so good and everyone's so entertaining. And, even a few episodes in, you already start to care about the characters and their motivations, at least that we know so far. And, I'm excited to keep listening and get through the 42 episodes and then move on to the newer stuff because it's cool. And the fact that you guys aren't, you're not Critical Role, or these giant, tabletop companies. It's kind of like you said with the smaller community, there's these games that are smaller. You feel like you can connect to these players and this podcast. I don't know. It's cool. Like I met you, Mike, and that's awesome. But even just talking to you, Ben, listening to you and then talking to you now, I'm like, I know him.
I'm good. Glad
so
to hear
that's cool. I definitely see why there's people, trying to get your autograph and stuff because a fan's a fan and you're putting out good content and regardless of who you are, you're somebody to a listener. And I mean, yeah, dang, I should have gotten an autograph. I didn't realize what I was missing out on. I just walked away from that table and dang it.
Yeah, it is. It's really, And podcasting is about collecting listeners by the ones. And
Yep.
if that doesn't motivate you, and I know it does motivate you, but I'm saying that's what we chase after, is knowing that each person who's listening to us has some sort of personal connection to us. Partially, it's just because listening to someone like, I don't know, voices are really personal. They get in your head and you can hear them bouncing around later. And so that's maybe part of it, but also just our best growth has always came from Gen Con. We've done 3 Gen Cons as Monster Game Night, and that was where we met the most people, because when you build that personal connection, suddenly everything changes. They're not just listening to some jerk who wants them to listen to their show. They're listening to their friend and someone that they played a game with. And it just, I don't know, it's the same thing as like when I drove back and I put on your pre-Gen Con show and I was like, oh my God, these guys were at my table and they're awesome.
It's such a funny point. It's after Gen Con, I showed Richard on our stats, and I'm like, look at this spike. Like, more new people checked out our show than we talked to about us at the show. Like, why is this happening? And I don't know if it's word of mouth or just people being like, I don't know, like, let me scan the QR code in this guy's backpack. Like, but there were, we like tripled in that week compared to what we were getting the week prior and the months prior on average. And it's still up there compared to where we were previously. And I'm like, wow, like, and this was us going to Gen Con as press and interviewing companies and talking to people and going for the first time, really checking things out and being, almost overwhelmed at just how massive it was and how cool it is. And we're like, all right, these are all the things we're going to do next year. And we definitely already are like, all right, here's our new game plan. Like, I would love to run a game for some people and really get to know them just like you did, Mike. And because that's inspired me. And it's such a cool, like you mentioned, like, oh yeah, it's a great way to meet people. Yes. Like, I don't think I've ever been able to have such genuine conversations with people that are into the same thing as us as we did at Gen Con. It was really cool.
Yep, totally agreed.
There's no expectations. We're all nerdy gamers there. No one is trying to put on. It's like we can all let everything down and just be dorks together. I love it.
That's why I miss PAX South. It wasn't nowhere near as big as Gen Con, and Gen Con definitely has its own unique feel. But we used to at least go to PAX South when they had that, and it was just like, all right, for the weekend, we can kind of just be ourselves. And Gen Con was that like tenfold. So now we're just counting down the days until next year, I guess.
I know, it's so far out already.
Yep.
Have to deal with the housing lottery and getting games scheduled and submitted and all of that. But then that Thursday to Sunday is just so worth it.
Yeah.
We're definitely we're aiming, if possible, to get a connected hotel this time, just to make sure the gaming never has to stop.
It's so worth it.
Yep. I had the first thing I listened to you from you guys was your Gen Con wrap up episode, and it was really gratifying to hear. Like, also as a first full-time attendee, when we did our live show before, I only came up for that one day, but then this year I was able to commit to the full time, and I definitely agree with you that like a connected hotel or being close by, like I was about 2 blocks away from the convention center in mine, and it made such a huge difference. Like, normally I would have winced at paying for that and leaving my car in the parking garage for 4 days and everything like that. But I was just like, you know what? This was completely worth it. Worth every single dime.
And it was interesting because it was something that we almost didn't attend. We originally, when we were going to go, we had the press pass applied for. We only got one. And we're like, it's very far from Florida. Flights weren't working out for us both to be able to fly, so I was going to drive up, he was going to fly up, meet me, and then we're going to drive back, and it just got really weird. And then I think it was the last week, the pieces came together enough to just say, okay, we're doing it, right? I got everything booked. You can't back out now, please don't back out now, or I'm going alone. And then we did it, and then now it's like, all right, let's start taking time off every August for the next 5 years.
Yep.
Let's just this. We can't miss this.
Well, and even before I was into trying to make my own podcast and everything like that, Gen Con was still worth it. Every year is different and good. Like, yeah, I'm trying to make this content creator thing happen, But just going to Gen Con as me and just hanging out with other gamers was completely worth it.
Yeah, that's the part I haven't really experienced yet, and I'm definitely going to try to prioritize more going forward.
Yeah.
I'm like, I swear next year I'm going to aim for the opposite. I'm like, all right, I still want to see that exhibit hall, but I really want to run some games and meet some people.
Yep.
So maybe I'll start seeing less and less Gen Con the more I go. Who knows?
Well, and I'm not a fan, like, okay, maybe this is just salty of me. I actually wish the exhibit hall was a lot smaller because I just want more games to be run. Like, I just want Gen Con to be us filling up the Indianapolis Convention Center with 1 million tables and someone running a
Just
game,
tables everywhere.
anything. Yeah. Just the entire thing. I mean, I won't complain. Everyone's got fun in the way they have fun, but I get a little disappointed when I see people buying code names at the convention hall, at the exhibit hall, because it's like, you could have bought that at Target. Like, I don't know.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's other things to buy there for sure.
But that's very gatekeepy of me, and I'm glad, like, everyone comes to Gen Con for their own reasons, and they all belong. They're all gamers. They should all be there. So I don't really mean that other than I just want to run more games, and I want everyone running games.
Yeah, like for example, one thing that I very, 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 very briefly considered was I was looking up games for Star Trek Adventures. I'm a massive Star Trek fan. It's my first franchise love. It always will be. And they had a game set up where they had, I think, 10 different tables of players, and each table was a separate ship, and they were working together as a fleet to solve a problem. And I was like, oh, that sounds so cool. And then I saw it was a 7-hour commitment.
Yeah.
And I was like,
The commitment time.
I can't do that one. I want to so bad, but no.
It sounds like a dream.
It sounds so good.
There was a Dungeons and Dragons like campaign essentially that was taking place, and by the time we decided to go, it was already booked out anyway.
Mhm.
But I think it was like $200 or something like that, and I was like, "Why is it so expensive?" And then they were like, "Because it's like 5 hours every single day of the convention.
Yeah.
Oh my
You're
God.
playing in like a 20-hour game, bro, and it's one continuous story with your team and the DM, and you all are on this like big adventure together." And I was like, "This sounds amazing! I want to do it so bad."
Oh,
So it just knowing that like that was happening at Gen Con, and I never saw it. Like
Yeah.
there's it's so huge. There's so many rooms and everything. It's I need it to happen 6 times a year. So well, I don't know if I can afford it,
Yeah.
but
Yeah,
6
no,
times a year
yes.
so I can experience a different version of it
Yes.
throughout the year, because God,
exactly.
I wouldn't have done it any different, but I would have done everything different. I don't actually know the right answer.
No, you're right completely. It's different because it's so huge. You can only get like one facet of it a year.
Yep.
And I've been going for a long enough time that I'm like, every year I go to Gen Con, it's different. It's always good. Yeah, I've had a few bad experiences at Gen Con, but not many. And it's just, yeah, go and whatever you do, you're going to have a good time.
Yeah, I can't wait. Well, thank you for talking to me about your Gen Con experience. Was there anything else you wanted to hit on Werewolf before we wrap up today?
So my wrap up on Werewolf is it's really good. Grab it, run it. It's a good time. And I don't know. I think like I hope that they put out some errata. I hope they make some patches to it. But my complaints are so small compared to what we had to deal with when V5 came out and all the issues that we're having. This is like at least 40% better than the first release of Vampire V5.
Yeah.
That's quite the improvement.
Yeah, exactly. And just in terms as a player at first, I was like, oh, we have to go back to World of Darkness again. I'm going to have to... And I didn't even touch character creation. One of the other guys on the show took time to make some pre-gens, and he made one specifically for me that he thought that I would have fun playing, and he nailed it. I sat down, and within 10 minutes of doing some stuff, I was like, okay, yep, I'm back. I'm here. I'm having fun with this. So yeah, definitely don't be scared to give it a shot, even if you're somebody that's been sitting around playing Vampire for years and years and years. Just give it a shot. See if it refreshes you a little bit.
Yeah, for one, I'm going to pick up this book. It, like you said, I didn't know anything about it, wasn't interested at all at the beginning of this, and now I am dying to play it. And we already have a Halloween game scheduled
Yeah.
Excellent.
But I'm like, ooh, man, what if Halloween goes a little long this year? You know,
Ooh.
because
You're going to make it a
This sounds
week,
really
maybe a
fun.
month. I mean, there's plenty of people to do
Yeah,
that.
we're gonna have a werewolf game in our near future.
Excellent.
Because I have a feeling I'll be picking up this book this weekend if it's at our FLGS. So
see, now what's going to happen is me and Richard are going to race to see who can figure out how to run it first.
Ooh.
And yet at the same time, we'll both be okay with being the player. This
Yeah,
is kind of the
exactly.
weird
It'll work
relationship
out.
we have.
Take turns.
Good. It's
Yeah.
so worth it. I hope you run it. I hope you have a good time. Also, we're going to run it for you anyway at some point.
Yeah,
Either
exactly.
we owe you a Blades game or a Werewolf game. One of the two. That's
Yeah.
been established.
Maybe that'll be one of those Gen Con continues through the night things next year.
Yeah.
Oh, God,
God, that would be so much fun. Yes, pencil
You
it
can't
in
just
right now.
say that, Ben.
Saturday night at Gen Con. That's what we're doing.
What if we're running a live show then?
After the live show.
Okay. All right.
we'll figure it out.
Werewolf through the night. I love it.
Oh, that'd be fun.
I'm just a bit older than he is, so I'm a little concerned about my energy level.
Well, thank you both for being on. Honest to goodness, I know we've been trying to get this together for a little bit, and just huge thank you so much. Mike, Ben, where can people find you? Where's the best place to find you?
God, just look up our podcast. We're terrible at social media.
Yeah.
We all kind of hate social media. And so every time we talk about it, we're like, we're going to make a big social media push. And then we start doing it and we're like, this sucks. I don't want to be on social media.
Yeah. But basically, every podcatcher that's out there, we run through Podbean, so it
Apple
distributes.
Podcasts,
Apple Podcasts,
iTunes,
Google Podcasts.
Spotify,
Yeah.
Google, YouTube. We're on everything. You can find us. Just Google Monster Game Night. You'll find us. And we really appreciate everyone listening to us.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much for having us on, by the way. It's amazing to me that we met and we hit it off so well, and just so cool that we could put this together. Thank you so much.
Yeah, fantastic talking to you guys for the first time. Looking forward to meeting you in the future.
Yeah, no, it was great. We appreciate you guys coming on and talking to us.
Excellent.
Yeah, honestly, genuinely, a really good time. If you ever want to come back on, let us know. If you ever want us for anything, let us know. If not, at the least, can't wait to see you next August.
Yeah.
Totally. Absolutely.
Oh, thank you.
But for now, I've been Tyler.
And I've been Richard.
And we've been True Strike. Hey, adventurers. Thanks again for joining us today. Please be sure to give us a follow on your favorite podcasting platforms and YouTube. If there's any questions you'd like to write into the show, you can hit us up on Threads or Instagram. New episodes release every Tuesday at 2 p.m. Eastern. Thank you for listening to True Strike. And one more massive shout out to Ben and Mike from Monster Game Night Podcast. Thank you so much, guys.